Julian. Nice to see you. It's a pleasure to have you here today. So we're here to do another episode, right, of the Spotlight interviews. Today we're actually going to be talking about the secrets behind PSPs, right, unlocking new markets seamlessly, and that ultimately incorporates a lot of different things. But I think having you specifically here is perfect because you have the perfect experience for it. We'll touch on PSPs, APMs, local acquiring licenses, but also, like not everything is always shiny. So like the failures, the successes, the good, bad, and ugly. And from there, how you create ultimately like a platform that optimizes global payments and performance. So Julian, pleasure to meet you. Yeah, I had JP here previously, so pretty fortunate to now have you. Would love to have you kind of tell me a bit more about yourself, introduce yourself, and we'll go from there.
Arthur, thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm Julian Nuñez. I'm the co-founder and COO at Uno. We are basically a global payment orchestrator helping companies to focus on their business and not on building payment infrastructure.
That's pretty cool. JP gave us a little bit of a rundown of what was. His story was pretty interesting with Rappi back in the day. But yeah, here today I think the topic is a little different, right? So it's more what is the secret sauce? And I guess you guys, as you were saying, right, it's not about companies and merchants building their own infrastructure for payments. It's more leveraging the right partners to help you kind of guide this and for them to focus on their business. So maybe you can tell me a bit more why it's important, that companies focus on their business and not necessarily on creating the payment infrastructure right behind the scenes, the connections and everything else. I think taking a 30,000 feet view, explaining why that's complicated, and then why it's important that you guys can do it, that's going to be great.
Great. So, well, I think companies right now are default global. There are only a few markets where you can have a company operating in a single country and scale to become a huge company. Companies now need to expand internationally, and doing that, they face many complexities, not just things like languages, cultures, regulations, but also basically they need to collect their revenue. And accepting payments worldwide, it's pretty tough. And normally what we see is that there are many companies dedicating a lot of resources to basically create payment infrastructure, and they sometimes forget or get in focus of their core business. That was what happened to us working at Rappi. Well, when 200 people for the payments team, and we've kind of forgot or getting focus of our core business that was basically delivering burgers really fast. So yeah, I think that's why it's so important. And it's also important because it's not just about accepting payment methods and accepting payments, but it's like creating a seamless local payment experience that really connects with consumers, and of course reducing the technical and operational complexity for your company, for the merchant. So yeah, that's why it's important.
First, I'm gonna have to go back to JP because he actually didn't mention that you guys hired like 200 people. I think there's always that, build versus buy or build versus partner in this case scenario. You're touching on something that's interesting, right? Which is if you don't like, in order to have kind of a seamless payment infrastructure and build that, you said it a little bit, but you have payment methods, right? You have a local experience, you have local acquiring licenses. Unless you have those, you can't really use some of the local payment methods. And so, like, technically speaking, there's so many different requirements, right, that make it complicated to have the right infrastructure, especially if you don't look at just one market, but multiple markets. And so the technical requirements can be quite heavy. It usually slows down the expansion process, right? And enabling a company to, as you said, I didn't know you guys were actually focusing on selling burgers, but selling, like, or going about your business and not having to always look at how do I expand, leveraging a new partner and so integrating and doing another integration. And then there is also, as you scale as a merchant, you have to go through an RFP process most of the time, which is, for the ones that don't know, a request for proposal, which is you outline a whole set of requirements that you have as a merchant, and then you have to show your shareholders, right, like why you're selecting a vendor over a different one. And so like that process is very lengthy. The resources that you have to put in place, I'm guessing, are quite heavy, not just on the technical side, but on the business side, strategy side, product side. So quite interested in learning now that we know the why, right? Like why do you need to have a partner that's there, and why do you need a seamless infrastructure to create like a good experience whenever you expand? Let's dive into the how. So tell me more about the process. What does it look like specifically to unlock kind of new markets seamlessly?
So look, traditionally, I mean, you would decide which market you want to expand to. Probably you would connect to an aggregator, or you are already connected to a payment aggregator, and basically that is the aggregator you already use in your local market, which might support some payment methods in the region you are expanding into. And normally those solutions have a weird user experience that what we have seen within our customers, and normally they have a limited selection of payment methods and really high fees. That's what we are seeing that is happening traditionally. What's happening now, I think, with a partner like for example, the first part is understanding the nuances of each market that you want to expand into. Payments are very fragmented. Each region has unique consumer preferences, payment methods, and even regulatory requirements. So the first step is identifying those payment methods, those providers that fits well for your customers and to your company. Normally, you find different payment methods in every country you want to expand into. You sometimes find that there's one provider that works really well in Malaysia, but then when you go to Mexico, that partner, that provider doesn't even exist, or it's really bad in that specific market. So you really need to understand who to work with, and from there you basically need to engage with the providers to ensure they meet all your requirements. You need to close agreements. You need to, of course, handle technical work like integration, reconciliation, maintenance, and that's a complex process that you normally have to face. But for example, with that effort is significantly reduced. We simplify the whole process. We help our customers understanding each market. We connect them with the right providers, with the right people in the right providers, and we are able also to offer a single technical integration. So with just a few clicks in our dashboard, they can seamlessly access any provider in the world. And yeah, we are basically making it incredibly easy to scale globally, at least in the payments part.
That's really interesting. I think taking a step back, right? You mentioned each country has different payment methods, right? So consumers in each of those countries are going to want to pay differently. As a merchant, right? Like, how do you ultimately come to the table and find out which one of those payment methods actually makes sense? Because it's not just a payment methods per country; it's a payment method per country, per type of business model. So, like a subscription business, right, is going to have a very different type of behavior as a customer, right? Like going into a subscription business rather than someone else going into, let's say, a marketplace where you just purchase a burger, for example, right? Like, so how are merchants able to kind of find that information onto which payment method do they need to add? Because that's the first step. Then the second step is then, okay, so now which providers could potentially provide this? And then there's the choice of choosing those providers. Like how do you, as within and I'm guessing just with other conversations that you have as well, how do you guys kind of help with that process? Like how do you guys even find the information? Like how do you know which payment method per business model is going to be accurate?
Normally, it's almost impossible. I mean, we work with really large companies around the world. We work with people who manages payments for a global organization. This person is based in San Francisco, and they are supposed to define the strategy regarding payments for a country like Thailand, but also for Colombia and Morocco. And I mean, it's impossible to really understand each market. For that's not an exception. For us, it's also been super challenging, but that's our full-time job. So we literally have a database with thousands of rows, where we have all the payment methods, all the payment processors all around the world. And we also have like the understanding of, for example, those specific wallets, who are using those wallets. If it's, for example, people of the base of the pyramid or people with really high incomes, if that country in specific has a really high penetration of credit cards or really low. So probably if the penetration is really low, you need a buy now pay later solution. So we have them all, and we understand the advantages and disadvantages of each one of those. And basically it's been super challenging. We have an amazing partnerships team, an amazing integrations team that is constantly looking for new payment methods. When we think we have them all, it's a lie. There's always a new payment method, a new startup trying to disrupt the market and create something new. And there's always a customer telling us, hey, I need this new integration, probably a provider that we have never heard about in the past. So we are constantly increasing our knowledge about the payment market and payment ecosystem worldwide. But definitely this work for a company where the focus is not payments, it's crazy. I mean, I had this idea of all the complexity of the payment ecosystem, of course, when we started Juno, but now for me, it's like, wow, someone trying to run like a payments team all in house for a global company. It's almost like a crazy idea because it's too difficult.
It's a startup. It's a startup within the
It's a
company.
whole startup, yeah.
Literally, I think I really think we need to make a push for a chief payments officer as a new type of executive with the no, I'm serious because
Yeah, yeah.
when you think about it, right, payments, the impact of payments goes much further than just accepting payments. You can also create marketing initiatives because you understand the consumer behavior. You can then also take the transactional data that you're getting, right, and better understand how to run your business. Like there are many things that you can do out of payments if you really understand how to do it. But that also means if you have so many things, right, you have potentially a lot of noise, of distractions. But your business is still not running a payments company, right? It's running your business. So like there must be so many things in there. Yes, tell me. Man.
Totally. I think traditionally there was this idea of payments just like a backup area, like the something that was not important. We just needed to accept the payment because our customers need to pay. But now, for example, we are super surprised for many customers that can unlock new revenue streams adding a new payment method, adding, I don't know, Pix in Brazil or UPI in India, or starting using retries or smart routing, and suddenly they increase the acceptance rate 20 basis points or 200 basis points or even 20% increase in conversion rates just for doing a new thing. And that sometimes is even more than the annual growth rate of the companies we are working with. So that's crazy.
No, it is. And I think you're touching another point, right? Which is the fact that I think the keyword of today's kind of episode is seamlessness and growth, right? But when you think about seamlessness and then you think about, their payment methods, but those payment methods also bring new capabilities like Pix and recurring, right? Like there is that's going to be launched pretty soon. But then there are also new payment methods out there, and each market is different. So yeah, I'm fascinated. I mean, I think people know already. I'm a big nerd when it comes to payments, and that's probably the reason why. It's because there's always something happening. The impact that it has on the business is not just numbers; it can also be experiences. And I think like ultimately, it's very hard to achieve in the payment space seamlessness. I think people don't really understand, and that's why like what we're doing right now is so important. People don't understand the complexity behind the scenes, right? All of the different players out there, the decisions that you have to make, which are not just payments decision, but again, like if you have and add new payment capabilities, potentially you can unlock new experiences within other areas of the business. And so like, people pay differently in each region. Each payment method acts differently. Different acquirers, different models, payment service providers. is a broad term as well. So that encompasses, from gateway, which is like just the portal, right? Think about the portal, as well as just alternative payment providers, which only deal with alternative payment methods or acquirers only. Like the complexity of the ecosystem is insane. People don't see that. So like, how would you say is the best way to kind of manage this? Because you don't want too many contracts. You also want to have the right providers with you. You don't really know which provider is going to work well for you. Because today, right, like let's say I'm a merchant. If I go to a processor or to a PSP, generally they're going to say, yeah, we have a merchant that does exactly like you, and this is their performance. But in reality, if you think about it, no two merchants are the same. So how do you manage, that whole ecosystem? How do you build that right infrastructure, those right partnerships, and get the results that you want?
Well, so you're absolutely right. Seamlessness is almost impossible. It's very hard to achieve in payments. I'm always amazed when I pay with a credit card. I don't know, I tap my card in a terminal and it just happens. You pay, and people never imagine what all the things that happen behind the curtains, you know? It's pretty complex, pretty crazy, all the things that are happening. We are basically trying to build the same seamlessness for merchants. And our approach is based basically, I would say, in two pillars. The first one is technology. We have an amazing technology team, a huge technology team, trying since day one to build a modular and scalable platform that allow us to integrate any payment method all around the world and adapt to different providers and payment methods really quickly. We Yeah, our team is really good. Like the Junos technology is really rocket science in the backend because we need to support any user experience, any payment method all around the world in any language with any currency. So I think technology is super important, and for merchants, have a great technology is key. Some of them try to build their technology themselves. That's a way to do it. But I definitely think it worth to have someone else helping you with that, and someone with the expertise to build that technology. That's one part. And the second part, I think, are partnerships. I think you really need to build strong relationships with PSPs, gateways, alternative payment methods, anti-fraud solutions, acquirers, and basically all the payment ecosystem that helps you to be ahead of the market. And if the market changes, you can stay being a leader, and you can deliver a consistent experience for your customers. um so for me, those two aspects are super critical, and in our case, basically leveraging in those two things, we can keep the complexity away from our merchants and let them focus on their core business or in more strategic tasks within payments.
I think that makes total sense. I wish you could have seen your face whenever you said, "Yeah, that's a way to do it." About like building the technology in house. I think, we're not talking about the hybrid model, right? Ultimately can also be interesting where you build a component, but then you like a core, right? And there are actually, like I found out not too long ago, there are some companies out there that are able to take your core, whether it's, Universal Vault or your core banking infrastructure, and almost like duplicate it. And then on that core, you perform kind of the enhancements on the duplicate, the twin. And then from there, you basically take whatever works and you bring it back to the real core. And that's the way to kind of do it. And so now you can also, on the twin, you can literally integrate anything that you want. So you could integrate, like a or another company, right? Or a direct connection to a PSP, whichever it is, test it out, and then only if it works, bring it to the core. So things like this are hyper innovative. I think something else I was thinking as you were going into to the answer, it was another way for merchants to find out which payment method matters, which payment processor they should be talking to. And you talked about a little bit, but the relationship. But the relationships don't necessarily always have to be with, I call us partners, right? So like PSPs in general, I think are partners more than vendors. They should be providing a whole experience and a whole relationship, and trust and loyalty should be created. At the same time, they could also go directly to other ones of their peers,
Yeah.
right? Like what we're finding out is like like merchants ultimately and payment leaders should communicate with each other. They should have the opportunity to sit down next to each other in an environment where they can comfortably just share their thoughts. And sometimes it's going to be positive, sometimes it's going to be negative, right? But no matter what, it's good feedback. And I think that merchants should keep doing this. I see it quite a bit virtually. I think that there's a great opportunity for people to connect in person as well, to kind of share those best practices. When you think about the different payment methods out there, I think it's highly important to understand which one works for you or not. Some companies have already expanded in those markets, right? And you can give your point of view, but I think everybody always needs multiple. So like, like also some companies are going to fail. And that touches on a little bit more of something else I want to talk about, which is, the I think building an infrastructure, even for a company like, it didn't happen without a few hurdles, right? I'm sure that you faced creating a full reconciliation uh, that can take, different files and centralize it into one place and then make it easy for merchants to leverage this. The different connections that you had to build, even though you have an incredible tech team, I'm sure that you face complexity as well to create seamlessness. So I'd love to kind of hear, like what are some of the things that you guys have seen that have gone wrong? If merchants want to build things by themselves, they should look at and be aware that this is a hurdle that they will have to face. And also like how did you, ultimately like overcome those hurdles? So quite interested on this as well, because I think, as you said, some want to build themselves. And so like maybe learning a bit more about the complexity there, what you guys have faced, can enable them to either keep going that path, but make it faster and more efficient, or decide to go the other route and choose the right partner.
Well, so I mean, I think for sure one of the biggest mistakes we've made with Juan Paulo, with JP, was at Rappi, and it's obvious. It's basically trying to handle everything on our own.
Okay.
Payments might seem like a technical challenge at first, but it quickly becomes clear that it's a massive operational and strategic problem. Normally, maintenance, it's impossible. You have these payment processors that gives you the API, but then a few months later, a couple of years later, they tell you, hey, we have a new API, and if you want to have a good acceptance rate, you need to use this new API. So you
Yeah.
need to remake your integration again, and that's crazy. And that's why all the companies end up dedicating a lot of resources to the payments team. And basically, I think the key takeaway, it's not trying to avoid the payment complexity, but try to reduce the payment complexity, outsourcing the more complex parts and the parts that don't really add a lot of value, and try to focus on high value areas like strategy, like partnerships, like creating better customer experiences, and yeah, basically optimize payment flows, trying to drive growth with your payment strategy, and not getting lost in technical or operational challenges. That's probably one of the huge mistakes we made in the past. Let me think more. And I would say that,
Take your time, huh? It's
yeah, yeah, yeah. And I would say that probably another huge mistake that we see within our customers, at least when we start working with them, is that they are only working with a single provider, and they have worked with that single provider for the last 15 years. So they have crazy fees. They have never tried to negotiate that. And sometimes the acceptance rate is pretty old. Sometimes it's a very outdated local player or something like that. And I do think all the merchants should have a multi-provider strategy, and they should always try to work with the most innovative providers, because there are really good providers all around the world, local providers and also global providers. And we are seeing many companies working with legacy players with very old technology. And I think that's another huge mistake, and thinking about payments in the old fashioned way. That is, I just need to collect the payment and that's it. But what they don't see is that they are losing a lot of money in conversion rates, in declines. They are losing a lot of money in fraud. They are losing a lot of money in processing fees, and overall their business is much worse if they don't change that mindset and that strategy.
Funny enough, and I'm gonna geek out for just a second, but I was talking to a merchant, and actually more than a merchant, I think it's a payments leader because companies are based off people. And so like it takes people with the right mindset, I think, to disrupt the way that things are being done in one company. I don't think it happens with one single individual. I think it happens with multiple, but I do think that's needed. And in the US, right, like that company was working with one of the oldest and biggest actually like payment processors in the US. And when I asked them, hey, like what's your strategy around just like any other technology providers, you can be down. What's your strategy if that company goes down, right? Like how are you gonna accept payments? And this that company goes down, the US is down. And I was like, well, that's a great strategy, right? Like, I mean, if the US is down, you're down too. Well, that you can potentially think about it differently. But that was kind of the thing. And I think the second topic on this is the fact that back in the day, and that's why I was very interested by what you just said. You said that their rates were something they weren't even trying to negotiate because they only had one. What I had seen and understood from my time in that space is back in the day when you worked with one processor, yes, you didn't introduce competition into your processing stack, but because you gave them all of your volume, and volume is something that processors like, you would have gotten the best rates. And so you didn't want to go to a different processor because then you would have split your volume, and so the rates that you were going to get were actually going to be more expensive because now you were sending less volume. But then now you get to a point where you have multi-processor, but because there's competition, right? Like the processors are trying to fight for the payment's attention, right? The payment leader's attention, and so get their volume. So they're actually going to reduce as much as possible their fees. So it's a different mindset that I think is very interesting and ultimately going to help. And I think the last piece that you mentioned, which is very interesting, is sometimes paying for a transaction a little bit more. Like you're gonna choose because you can optimize performance differently. You can look at it from acceptance, or you can look at it from a cost perspective, or you can look at it from a contract perspective, many different things. But at the end, even if you don't route the transaction towards your lowest cost provider, you route it or you retry it with a provider that's maybe a little bit more expensive. Let's say it's $100 and you pay $3, right, for accepting the payments. You gain $97. Then you reduce everything else, but you're still making a profit, right? But you accept it by accepting the transaction. Sometimes companies are like, yeah, I don't want to retry this. And I'm like, why? And they're like, well, it's too expensive. And I'm like, look at your opportunity cost here. And that's where you start understanding that acceptance is the number one thing that you really need to focus on. And so optimizing and creating a seamless, even retry, right, logic is highly important. So yeah, those are things that I think about and sometimes people forget. So it's interesting, right?
Totally. We see many companies facing those decisions every day, and yeah, some don't have the right decision making process sometimes. And the same happens, for example, with fraud. When you have fraud solutions that sometimes you have almost zero fraud, but you are not aware that probably your conversion rate is just 50%.
Yeah.
And probably if you wouldn't have the anti-fraud solution, your acceptance rate would be 90%. So you also need to everything is a trade-off. So you need to decide how much fraud you would like to have and how much your acceptance rate will be affected because of that. And everything is about optimization and having all that data and all those controls to tweak on a daily basis. It's pretty difficult to have. Well, yeah, with it's very seamless.
It makes it a little easier, right? Whenever you have a company that has all your the integration and technology in the back, and I agree. So actually, like something that we talked about was, failures or what you guys ultimately had to rework on. What about successes, right? We don't only want to talk about the ugly and the bad stuff. Like, what about successes? What have you realized was easier and more valuable than you had originally predicted, right? So like from a optimization or seamlessness perspective.
I mean, there are many things, but I mean, I would say that the increase in conversion rates because of the customers using smart routing, the conversion rates increasing up to 20, 25%. That's huge. That's a lot. And I mean, we obviously expected customers to see an increase in those conversion rates, but with specific industries, it's crazy the amount of the increase. That's one. Secondly, we have also seen a lot of merchants that have really high processing fees, sometimes because they have been working with the same provider for the last 10 years and they were charging the normal 2010 fee in a local market in a developing country, and that was sometimes 15% or 10%, something like that. That was crazy. So seeing after a few intros and not having the technical problems to make the integration, reduce those fees to 3%, 2%, less than 2% is crazy. And it's crazy how our customers are like super thankful because they actually didn't consider that as a lever to grow and improve their business. So, and of course, with fraud is the same thing as I mentioned before. Many merchants working with anti-fraud solutions that were just there, like they have that turned on because
Yeah.
there was fraud. And after doing some A/B testings with other tools, they found out that sometimes it's a trade-off. So probably they can have the anti-fraud solution just for certain transactions or just for a certain product or certain geo, or probably test out several anti-fraud solutions and have a much higher approval rate and the same fraud rate, or a little increase in the fraud rate that was not material for them. So helping our merchants to solve and optimize their payments and improve their businesses, that's the best thing that happened to me in my work life because it's so exciting. And I think the improvements have been much better than we had predicted in the past.
Yeah, well, to be honest with you, yeah, 25% is seems pretty insane. I think we need to say that louder for the ones in the back, right? And by this I mean I think people need to realize the real impact of payments. I mean, obviously, I love this space. I think that you're a fanatic of it as well. We need more people like this because it's a rabbit hole. And actually, let me tell everybody, please do not dive into payments because you will never leave. I was told this the first time I got into the space, and I have to agree. I don't think that I will ever leave. But yeah, there's always something new. There's always something that could improve your business, and yeah, like those success stories around performance or around cost. I think to me, like people forget that if you cannot accept payments, you can't run your business. And so it's highly important, right? If you can accept one more transaction out of four in this case scenario, like that's insane, especially with the complexity behind. So thanks for this. I think I can thank you on behalf of quite a few people for building what you guys have done and continuing to do so. I guess one quick question on this, but like, you touched on it, I'm guessing, but what's the secret sauce? What makes what you guys are doing just wow, you know?
I think I don't know. I think that the sauce is that we faced the problem in the past. We solved the problem once, and we are basically solving the problem again, but for everyone. That's, I think, the biggest secret, and that we, since day one, we had the chance to team with the best people in payments around the world. So our team is full of payment experts that have been in the market for decades, both people building the technology and also people from partnerships or sales who has been working in the business side since 20 years ago. And I think that that has helped us to understand really well the problem and build the solutions that the merchants require. Yeah, I think that's the secret sauce.
Yeah, well, maybe you'll have to do it again afterwards once, things change. But tell us, we're coming to almost an end here, but yeah, two quick things. Tell us a fun fact about yourself. Like, tell me something about Julian that I don't know.
Probably the single thing that people get more impressed about is I really like music, and I actually have a recording studio at home.
No
Very
way.
basic. Yeah, yeah, a home studio here, and I love to make music. I've done my own compositions. Of course, I used to have a lot more time in the past, but I really enjoy when I have the chance to make music.
Okay, well, not saying you will publish any of that, but like if you want to send me a link to this, I'm very happy to kind of post
I
this. No,
can send it
serious.
to you.
I
I
love
have
I
many
love
songs.
music. Like that's actually probably one of my fun facts as well, which is in my spare time, like I usually spend most of my time with a lot of friends of mine that are in the music industry. And that's not necessarily what they do as a full-time thing. They just love music, Afro house, also some of the classics. But like I don't know, like people see me, like I tend to, I do like a good party. People see me, yeah, it's true. People see me out and about, and they ask me why, like how do I manage sometimes. I tell them, to be honest, like I go out because I love the music and because of my friends. Like I love spending time with good people. So I think music connects people together, so it makes total sense that you would be a music person. I'm serious though. Send a
I'm
link
gonna show
if
it
you're
to you.
open to it, because
Yeah.
I would want to listen to it, and I'm sure other people would. Julian, look, this was fun. Before we kind of close this out, like what's next for you? Right? Like, is there anything that you haven't touched on that you want to kind of tell everybody?
Well, right now, I think my focus is on getting more people to know about and how we can help their businesses. We want to make it easier for companies all around the world to focus on what they do best, without having to deal with the headaches of building and managing payment infrastructure. Payments can be complicated, payments are complicated, but they don't have to be if you have the right platform and support. Um, Payments are evolving fast, and we are super excited to keep growing globally and helping businesses to take advantages of all of the opportunities and new things that are coming up out there. And I'd also love to hear from the people who is watching this. What are the biggest challenges you are facing with payments? We are always looking for the next problem to solve, and I'm super curious about it, like genuinely. So yeah, I think that's it. And thank you so much for having me, Arthur. This was a lot of fun.
No, it's my pleasure, and yeah, I guess that could be a Christmas list, right? Like a list of problems to solve in the payment space. I think you actually explaining how a seamless infrastructure is created, and ultimately touching on some of the complexities that the payment space is facing, that already is helping the industry. So I think I can thank you on behalf of everyone. This was fun. I'm sure this won't be the last time that we do one of those, but for this time, yeah, that was the secrets behind PSPs unlocking new markets seamlessly, and I think you explained it very well. So thanks for the time. Enjoy the rest of your day, and see you later.
Thank you so much. See you later.